the way that you get this show, you're going to have to type in PowerPoint presentation into whatever it is that you use for video or audio podcasts. And then you're going to have to watch us. And when I say you have to, I mean... And now, Some Nobodies presents PowerPoint Showdown, where each presenter arrives unprepared and just has to do their best. Without further ado, this week's keynote speaker.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for our conference. Tonight, you will hear four professionals discuss our topic, the vampire myth in popular culture. With me, as always, are Guy Manlier, and our special guest, Dave Birowski.
Guy Man.
I'll be your keynote speaker, Guy Manliest, and I will be leading this conference tonight on PowerPoint Showdown. For those of you joining us for the first time, each speaker will be given 10 minutes to present on the topic of our week. After each presentation, there will be a short question and answer session from the panel. After the fourth presentation, the panelists will vote on which speaker will be awarded the $50,000 scholarship to Some Nobodies University and the Nostalgia Prize. Guy Manlier, can you showcase the Nostalgia Prize for this week?
Absolutely. I actually forgot that we were still doing that. So I happen to have here a one-of-a-kind, amazing Jurassic Park Army shoulder strap to hold at least up to 7 or 8 tablets, depending on what you need to type on.
Well, and the Batman pad actually increases the value. So.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm just going to put that in there as well. So that's good. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Manlier. And now, without further ado, I will be delivering our first presentation. Producers. My presentation this week is on if vampires weren't real, then there would be no pop culture to or to not make myths about them. Now, of course, vampires are a cornerstone of course, American popular culture, and American popular culture is a cornerstone of world popular culture. So by transitive property, vampires are a cornerstone of world popular culture. Without them, we couldn't make myths about them. And popular culture is just modern day mythology. Let's find out how. Let's go to the next slide. Now, of course, we had the discussion on the man versus the myth versus the monomyth. Now, first you can see a man. See? Do you see a man sitting on his field, elevated, both in mind and body above the just plains? And then there's a myth. Need I say more? Of course, it's important to distinguish between the man and the myth. Now, the man is sitting over his field, thinking. The myth, hovering over the woman, prowling. And the monomyth, invisible. Because the monomyth, it circums everything. Mono. Encircles. Mono. It has a lot of curves and a lot of circles in it.
Yeah.
The myth, it's spiky. It's got a lot of ups and downs. And then the man, a combination of both of them. It's through the monomyth and the myth that the man comes to be. Now let's go to the next slide, please. Now the monomyth slide, which I briefly covered in the previous one.
Because circles, yeah. Of
course. Circles within circles, just like George Lucas planned with the Star Wars trilogy and the prequel trilogy. Now, of course, Hero's Journey, also known as the monomyth, calls Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Now, I'm not going to go into too much of this. Dylan, the other host, is not here today. Myself, Guy Manliest, is filling in for him. But the monomyth is a bunch of pie slices, and with that pie slices, when they come together, you get a delicious story. And, of course, that delicious story filling right now is vampirism. And when you eat that pie, you get pop culture. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, of course, popular culture nowadays in America is dominated by the movie, cinema, film. You know what it is. I know what it is. I don't know why I'm explaining it to you. But we've got movies with vampires versus nah. Now, with vampires, you've got toothed movies. Vampires have fangs. Yeah. They go like that. Now, you've got 4 primary vampire films. And they are Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3. And, of course, rated from 0 stars to 6 stars on... I can't name the website because they're very litigious, but they go from 0 stars to 6 stars. You have Interview with the The first one, of course, was rated 4.3 stars. The second one, of course, 2.1, and the third, a 2 even. Twilight started off pretty weak at a 2.5, shot up to a 4.5, and down to a straight 2. Ed Wood, 3.5, 2, 3. Vampire Diaries, which is actually a TV show that was adapted from a movie, but of course I don't expect the people of this litigious website to understand that. Much higher rated on average, 4.5, and then of course you dip in 2.7, but that one featured Kevin Spacey in the lead role, and then up to 5 stars at the end for that thrilling conclusion. And then of course Gnaw, the Toothless movies. These are movies without vampires. They're horror movies and they're spooky and everybody's pale and creepy, but they're not vampires. You got Sleepy Hollow, Secret Window, Nick of Time, and Mordecai. And I'm not going to go through those rankings specifically, but you can see that the movies without vampires, not only are they generally on average rated higher, they're also rated horizontally. And the important thing about that is that unlike American popular culture, which goes vertically because we like to build tall, the Toothless movies follow the European format where they rate wide. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, now allow me to tell you this 10-word story about vampires. That was 11 words, but you know. Oi, versus my teeth. Chunk, bye-bye, small boy. Those aren't my teeth. Those are vampire teeth. Of course, I'm simulating this for the sake of the presentation. But, as you can see, vampire myths, you don't need a whole lot to go through. It's like those Twitter challenges where it's like, tell me a story in 6 words. You do it because you want to get the attention of a publisher or an agent, but those publishers and agents aren't paying attention to their Twitter feeds. They're not like querying people based on some 6-word story you told in response to a Twitter prompt. Get over yourself. But the vampire myth, it's got bite. It's got teeth. It's going to hook people. It's going to hypnotize people and then sneak into their room at night and watch them sleep. And that's how you get an agent. You got to learn. Vampire stories will tell you exactly what you need to do to get a book published. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, of course, main question and the main controversy about vampire stories is, do we need more dental terrors? People die, their gums recede. Doctors, dentists, they wear a mask. You can't see their teeth. Skulls, teeth out all the time. It's not great. Now, when surveyed, excuse me, an average of 2 out of 10 Americans said yes, 1 out of 10 said no, 8 out of 10 said not sure, 5 out of 10 said probably, and 7.5 out of 10 said maybe. And what do we learn from this? You got to properly source your surveys because those numbers do not add up or they allow people to answer multiple times. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so pop culture. I'm not going to get into the history of pop culture because, of course, you're going back to Gilgamesh, the first story that people generally know of, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, that sort of thing. But the normal progression of pop culture, you have a baby. That baby looks at something through a spyglass, and then money is exchanged under the table. And that money is used to buy a house, and that house leads to cannibalism. Powerful words. And I think we can all really learn a lesson about how vampirism extended from that theme of cannibalism that runs throughout American popular culture. Let's progress to the next slide, please. Now, in conclusion, pop culture, you got a lot of stories, but you have 3 main formats. You have someone stealing a corpse or a mannequin, such as in Mannequin 2 on the town. You have a man sniffing ankles, because who doesn't like a nice ankle sniff? And you've got a man biting a wrist. And you take those 3 together. You have rigor mortis, making the body stiff. You have an unnatural attraction to a part of the body. Not the ankle this time, but the neck. Because when you think about it, the ankle is just the neck of the leg. And then you have a man biting someone, feasting on their blood, turning them into a vampire. They're dressed as like peasants because vampire is like an old thing or something. I don't know. I had my assistant put this together. So in conclusion, the vampire myth leads into pop culture, goes into the mono myth. Man tells the mono myth. Man gets mono. Vampires don't feed on people with mono, and so you have the story of garlic with vampires in pop culture. And I think that will conclude my presentation today on if vampires weren't real, then there would be no pop culture to or to not make myths about them.
Great job.
Thank you.
Beautiful,
Thank you.
beautiful.
I will now accept questions from the panel. Yes, Mr. Guy Manlier.
Yes, Guy Manliest, first and foremost, thank you very much for taking your unimportant time and letting us know about vampires. My main question, though, and if we can get the producers to bring up the slide on the horizontal versus vertical, thank you. I did notice that of all of the Toothless movies, they all star Johnny Depp. Does that have any relevance to anything about either pop culture or vampires?
Or does he just have fake teeth?
He does have fake teeth only in Mordecai. But of course, Johnny Depp is a huge feature in a lot of American popular culture. And I just wanted to really capture the iconoclasm of that actor as he appears in different eras of American film. It was purely just a sampling bias. And I appreciate you bringing that up so I can at least acknowledge it in my sourcing.
Thank you.
Of course. Guy Manley.
Now, I think you covered everything that you were trying to perfectly, except for one thing. I was just wondering about how people with mono not getting bitten by vampires has anything to do with garlic. Does garlic give the people the mono, or is it a cure for mono, or are people just do their blood turn into garlic when they have mono?
Like, is it a lime juice scurvy situation?
Yes, I believe that mono is actually caused by a lack of garlic in the diet, and so when people would get mono in times past, they would hold garlic up to them as a way of repelling that, and through some sort of mixed signals, cultural transfer and translation error and that sort of thing. I think the two got kind of intertwined in the cultural brainstem. So to speak.
That did not answer my question, but don't.
Nor
don't
did it
worry
make
about
any sense whatsoever.
Well,
They hold the garlic up to them,
yes.
rather than. All right.
I've spent enough time on this question. Next question, please.
Can we bring up the Mano myth slide, please? I was wondering why Act 1 has 3 slices, Act 3 has 2 slices, and Act 2 has 4 slices.
This graphic was purchased from a stock image website, and it was not necessarily shopped for accuracy or appropriateness of the conversation. I just simply needed a visual aid with which to accompany the monomyth, which is a big word that not a lot of people bother knowing, so I could just kind of put whatever image I wanted up.
Right. I appreciate your thoroughness and attention to detail.
Yes. Any further questions from the panel?
No.
Right.
Expertly done.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
All
Good
right.
stuff.
And that concludes my presentation. Now, without further ado, please welcome our second presenter, Mr. Dave Borowski.
Thank you for the introduction. As you guys know, I can't make presentations without being absolutely shit-faced, so that is why I am double fisting. Also, I didn't want to have the shakes, so my presentation is on vampires, vamp, lamia, Nosferatu, undead, bloodsuckers, flirt, and the myth that makes up pop culture. So, a lot of bloodlines in vampires. Blood suckers, the whole thing. It's based in blood. It's actually a very traditional thing. Stretching back even to ancient Sumerian times, this need for blood, or thinking of blood as being good, or giving you longevity. It's why a lot of our politicians and billionaires still practice this, despite it not having any scientific basis. Next slide, please. What is pop culture? News, movies, fashion, entertainment, tech, food, slang. A culture appropriation could also be subbed for slang there. Again, all things ran by the rich, all people who drink baby blood. These are the issues surrounding vampires and the issues surrounding all of us in the world in current relevant culture. Now, these, are they affected by vampires or a cause of them? Next slide, please. my thesis. This is a picture of me from high school. I don't know why my assistant decided to include that in there, but still, I am puzzled by the entire thing. It's still very puzzling to me. The term popular culture was coined in the mid-19th century and is referred to the culture, traditions of the people, and the current times of what's popular at the time. Vampires properly originated in folklore in Eastern Europe in the late 17th and 18th centuries. There is some hints that it was earlier than that, maybe even further, but there's not a lot of data. And we like to be very scientific. We like to go with the data. And what we have, actual data for dates back to those times. The Vampire Diaries, an American supernatural teen drama television series, very similar to what my previous presenter was just speaking of what referring to Twilight, originally aired in September 2009. You'll note that predates Twilight. Not the books, however, the scripts. Were they written before? Were they written after? Who's to say? Again, no data. Next slide, please. Let's break this down. Why is a myth popular? Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And also, tits. Let's be honest, Who doesn't like those perky little puppers, Also, puppers, tits. You're starting to see the symbolism here, Thank you. Next slide. Chart of myths with or without vampires. Not self-explanatory. Now, Tom Cruise, vampire. It is believed by our pink line here that Tom Cruise did not start as a vampire. However, he's now a very high card-holding member of the Scientologist movement, known vampires. Now, see how that pink line shoots right up there at the end? Look at that. Grandpapa Munster, represented by the purple line here. Also ignore the things at the bottom where they say which lines are what. That doesn't matter. I'm not sure why that was added in. Grandpa Munster started vampire, kind of came back around, started really turning the thing around. Tried to stop, only ate rats for a little while. Even tried to go vegan, didn't quite work. Now slightly, moving back towards vampire over the time. Bill Captain. We actually don't have a line for him. I don't know why he's on here. And Edward Cullen. That's the blue line. Not vampire, huge vampire. Really less, actually, more human than he even started to begin with. And now moving up to sort of kind of vampire again. Next slide, please. Are myths even accurate? Now, here's where we're going to get into the really nit and gritty of this whole thing. When let's look at all these things that are supposedly supposed to affect or empower vampires. Wooden stakes, moonlight, garlic, changing into bats, and let's start with let's go all the way to the right here. Wooden stake in the heart would indeed kill the average house cat, unless it was mine. He's quick. He's a little wily guy. But with Robert Pattinson, almost certainly, unless he is wearing that sweet new Batman chest piece. But then, if you maybe like sharpened it enough and like slid it into a certain spot, who's to say? We'd have to do on the ground actual investigation and get actual data from attempting to murder Mr. Pattinson, which we can do. We have funding for it. Human, yeah. I mean, it could be. Again, depends on whether or not they have a previously broken chest plate that may be reinforced with metal. Again, we need more data, but what the data we have says, yes, probably death. For vampires, myth or not, seems to us that yes, wooden stakes still would be death. Moonlight, average cat house. I see it says lick self, but I feel like that is, that's pretty much universal. For me, the average cat, house cat, generally goes full werewolf almost, if you will, during the night. Runs around, does crazy stuff. Robert Pattinson, becomes Batman, but just fairly recently. Human, get in a hot tub, or get out of hot tub because it might be cold, depending on the time of the year. Vampire, go out, or not, or stay in and party and drink blood. Garlic, vampire, not big fans. Humans, sometimes, especially when they have the previously mentioned disease. So Robert Pattinson, we have a little bit of data on this. This is not a completely up to date slide. Robert Pattinson, allergic, strange. And actually, this is also not completely updated either. The average house cat plays with it and swats it around like a toy. Changing into a bat, vampire, yes, we believe so. That's what the data shows us. Human, not unless you're a Clinton. Robert Pattinson, sort of. Yeah. We'll say cosplays as bat. And average house cat, no. But the on average, again, need more data. Next slide, please. A starving child is a frightful sight. A starving vampire, even worse. Anne Rice. Well, I mean, she would say that, wouldn't she? You know what I mean? Next slide, please. And in conclusion, sometimes things can be two things. Pattinson, maybe. Again, we need more data. Also, is this a werewolf or a wolf king? Again, more data needed. So I believe that it makes it extraordinarily clear that we have some data. We need more data. So obviously, we need the funding. And now I will open it up to questions and answers. Guy Manlier.
Yes, thank you for trying to be eloquent during that presentation. It seems like the presentation was on the path to talk about vampires and pop culture, and then swerved drastically into you begging for money to get more data about house cats, werewolves, and I think possibly vampires. Will you please speak on that?
I mean, we're concerned that there are indeed vampires, and it's not just affecting pop culture, but I think what I established in the beginning, hopefully, and let me reiterate if I didn't make it clear, is that not only is it affecting pop culture, but it has become pop culture. We think that they have infiltrated into pop culture, and we really just need more data and therefore funding.
Perfect. I'll take my answer off the air.
Guy Manliest, please.
Yes, your encounter with the Wolf King is really well known in certain circles, but I think some people in our audience, A, are not aware of what a Wolf King is, and B, are not aware of the story. Could you elaborate on those 2 points for us?
Yeah, so it's a new term. We were all aware of back in the plague. There was a thing called a rat king, where several rats would get bound up together by their tails, and then run around causing havoc. And just it's up to no good, just doing shenanigans. Recently, it seems like several wolves will be joined by their heads, actually, and now we kind of adopted that term, but replaced rat with wolf. Thus, you have Wolf King.
Excellent.
Nice.
Thank you for the elaboration.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. And yes, Guy Manley.
Yeah, you said that you didn't know if the Vampire Diaries predated the Twilight books, but as everyone knows, the Vampire Diaries is a book series, and it came out in 1991. I don't think that your presentation was very well researched, and I don't have a question. I just wanted to let you know that there was a book series on the Vampire Diaries that came out in the early 90s, and
Hey,
you should
Guy
probably read
Manley,
it.
I'm just the presentation guy. Okay, I don't do the research. We need to hire more researchers, which is again why we need the funding.
Okay, well, there's about 60 books in that series, and
in all
maybe
fairness,
you should buy those and do the research on pop culture vampires.
Well, Guy Manley, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I promise you someone will be fired over this.
Good. That's all I want. All I wanted
Now,
to know was that
in all
somebody would
fairness-
lose their job.
In all fairness,
Someone will lose their job.
The Twilight is a book series based on fan fiction of musical genre, whereas the Vampire Diaries is a diary series, which is a little different because it's kind of like the true crime in written form, so not fictional.
Right. Well, and here's the thing:
Diuretic.
it sounds like you guys would be great researchers, and I would love to hire you once I procure this funding. So.
I enjoy my unemployment, but thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, let's get this guy a $50,000 grant so that we can get hired and replace the
researchers,
people that are going to get fired. Yes.
Well, thank you, Dave Borowski. We appreciate the presentation. We're on to our
Absolutely.
third
Thank you for your time.
speaker. Our third speaker, Guy Manlier.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to this presentation on such short notice. Obviously, what we're trying to do is make sure that we can quantify how vampires have gotten into pop culture. We know they're there. We understand what pop culture is. Heck, we understand what vampires are, but we want to understand what it means for the vampires in pop culture. Now, obviously, one of the fastest things, what sells the most? Sex sells. So you're going to come into pop culture, which is the popular culturalization of society. You're looking at things that sell. Sex sells. But is too much sex selling too much? Now, have vampires gotten too sexy? That's pretty much what I'm going to be getting into today, while also just skirting the lines of pop culture. Next slide, please. Now, opinion one, yeah, we got to stop making these vampires too sexy. When you look at the math, it almost doesn't add up. You have hunky men. You have big, thick mustaches with teeth coming right out of them. You have amazing goth humor. And the wardrobe is gorgeous. They're pretty much hanging out inside of a playpen, holding up what looks like sheer ignorance. But the problem is, that's sexy. And God damn it, a dumb man is sexy. A dumb woman is sexy. Big, long, bloody fangs, sexy. And the problem is that they're just taking over. If sex sells, vamps sell. Next slide, please. Now, here's why vampires should not be sexy. Now, if you look at this diagram over here, now it's easy for anyone to be like looking under the bookshelves for any kind of like understanding, because when you look at a regular eyesight, we don't know why vampires are so sexy. They shouldn't be. When you look at the kid in school that's a little too pale, do you think he's sexy? I don't know. When you look at the one person at the library and their teeth are way too long, is that sexy? No. But when you merge all those things together and you push them under a utility shelf while having them try to stop booby traps, let me ask you, should they be sexy doing this? Should these people that are getting on their hands and knees and backs and butts trying to disarm these booby traps for everyone, do they need to be sexy? I get why they need to be vampires. Well, okay, what is that yellow thing at the bottom? I have no. Next slide, please.
That's a plumb bob.
Oh, it's a plum. That's not a plumb bob. Plumb bobs are more intrusive to holes. That's not a plumb bob. That's a yellow version of when that's a deal. What's that?
I think it's a urinal cake.
Oh,
I think it's Kenny from South Park doing blackface.
that's nowhere near. Oh, actually, I see that. I don't like that. Next slide, please. Okay, opinion 2. No, please continue making vampires even sexier. Here's the problem is that we're skirting on the lines and like people are looking at these vampires going, oh, I'm pretty sure that's sexy. Now, if we made them sexier, the question would be gone. And then it's like, you know, when you watch Fast and Furious 1 and 2, you're like, I don't know where these guys are going to go. I'm interested. But now that you get to Fast and Furious 12 and 13, you're like, I don't care anymore, guys. I know what you guys are about. You're going to space. No longer sexy. You make them sexier, in return, becomes less sexy. Now, when you start revolving things around petri dishes and medication and what I think is the DNA strand of mononucleosis, which I think is Latin for one, hence the one person in the middle, you're going to see that everything revolves around just the nervous system of babies. Is that sexy? No, absolutely not. Next slide, please. Now, vampires are not sexy enough. This is a firm opinion. If you follow me on Twitter, you're going to notice that I say it a lot. Vampires are not sexy enough. It's almost a whirlwind of things that could be sexier here. Now, if you increase or decrease in deaths per day, which is obviously what happens when the vamps come out at night. They start increasing the deaths per day, right? Just that's 24-hour period, not just the daylight part of that. Now, when you look over here, you're going to see a whole bunch of dots of colors. And if I had the time, I would literally enlarge this so that I could read it to you to understand what most of this is. But all I can say is similar to the end fight of the Blade with the blood tornado, that needs to be sexy vampires, not blood. Next slide, please. Now, in my opinion, I mean, look, this is like the dumber equivalent of leading a horse to water. Can you go through a drive-through? Sure. Do you need a window to do that? No. Do you need air conditioning? Not if you can roll the window down. And obviously, because it's COVID, you can't tell who's a vampire by these masks or not. And honestly, it is smart in the stranger times, you know, the darker areas of the city. When you're out there looking for sexy robots, make sure you lock your doors, especially if you're in the drive-thru. Please, next slide. All right. Now, spotting vampires in the wild and deciding whether they're sexy or not is actually pretty easy. It's actually very easy. And if you look over here, you're going to see what the modern vampire looks at through the day. Now, if we go through some of these numbers, you're going to say 1, 2, not very sexy. 3, kind of sexy. 4, not sexy. Now you have 5 through 8, not sexy whatsoever. 9, don't know why, very sexy. 10, not sexy, not a vampire. I think that's a bear. 11 and 12, they're borderline. And this is what we got to stop. There's too many people wondering, am I allowed to think vampires are sexy? Am I allowed to be attracted to vampires? That's all just blood drinkers, right? But when you think about it, Latin for blood, sanguine. What's people's favorite thing to drink outside? Sangria. That's sexy. Next slide, please. Now, in conclusion, we can all just hide on these buses in London. We can go out and take tours of the city looking for the original sexy vampire. Is it Lestat from Interview with a Vampire? I have no idea. Is it some weird culmination of Cousin It and that one guy Snyder from that rock band that I can't think of right now? Twisted Sister? Maybe. Is he a vampire? I don't think so. This is not sexy, my friends. You got to look on that sexy scale. Not sexy. Now, when it comes to pop culture, like I said in the beginning, sex sells. When you have things like, what, Vampire Diaries, which no one has brought up today for some reason. You have 39 seasons of a show that is nothing but sexy men looking at each other, telling each other how sexy they are. And apparently, which I did my due diligence, I read roughly 60 diary novels of this thing to prove that there is nothing sexier than men emoting. What's a vampire? A little sad emo boy. Look 3 panels down. Little sad emo boy. Is that sexy? No. I want to thank everyone for their time, consideration, and thoughtfulness when it comes down to popular culture, sexifying myths and legends. And I will be more than happy to take any and all questions right now. Yes, Guy Manley.
Yeah. You mentioned sexy robots.
I did not.
You
did.
absolutely
You
did.
did. You 100% did.
Nope.
You
You said
100% said sexy robots, and I
you
was
said
wondering.
sexy robots. Yeah,
No.
that was one of my questions as well, Guy Manley.
I was wondering if that had to do, are the vampires sexy? Because you said that the sexiness comes from the
I think it was. I
vampires-
think it was on this slide. Yeah.
Yeah, you
That
said
doesn't
that
make
the
any sense.
vampires were emoting, and I think that that's impossible for robots to do. So which
Well-
one is it? Is it are the vampires robots? Are the robots all vampires?
And
No,
if I may add on to it,
Oh.
you said and I'm not, we're walking out here getting emotions from these sexy robots, and I was
Yeah.
like, robots don't have emotions.
Okay.
I mean, unless we're talking about AI now, is vampires just AI? What's going on?
Okay, it's pretty upsetting that the panel is not paying attention to what I feel is the most important slide and part of my presentation when it comes to the sexy robots. Because what happens here is you have these sexy vampires out, and they're trying to bite everyone's necks, right? But the problem is, what does a vampire find sexy? They don't find other vampires sexy. They find sex robots sexy. So vampires are on the hunt for the sexy robots where you got to stay away from, or else you're in direct path of those sexy vampires. My necks can't take that. My leg necks or my neck necks. Next question, please. Guy Manliest, please.
Yes, you did mention that you read all of the Vampire Diaries novels, all 60-some of them. Would you
Yeah.
mind giving us the title of your favorite and a brief synopsis of the storyline just for posterity's sake?
Yeah. So there is this one, I believe it's number 33 or I think it's 33, and it's like a spoof of Where the Red Fern Grows, and it pretty much is like a Romeo and Juliet style fantasy telling of what would happen if this 20-something's very sexy vampire stole a heart from someone. Now, obviously, there's a lot of thoughts to go with that. There's a lot of parallels you can put that, like stealing a heart. But no, he actually had a human heart, and he's licking it for sustenance. And then he decides that if he plants this thing, does he, in fact, grow a sexy vampire out of this? The answer is no. What he grew was some stench from rotting flesh under the ground. But yeah, number 33, where the red fern grows. I would say that's the one that I had to reread a couple times because it got me.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, Dave Borowski.
Can we bring up the final slide, please?
Yes.
So to me, it looks like, and now I could be wrong, but it looks like this may be actually making your whole point. Because I don't think this is commercially viable. I don't think this is sellable on a pop cultural level. Looks like to me this individual's arm is burning, that is in the sunlight, and they are yelling in pain while the rest of them is covered in shadow. Is this a vampire?
Well, we're not really sure. See, I took a cruise to London. I had to go around, and apparently the local customs are, if you hang outside of 266 Craven Park, you might find the elusive albino Sasquatch vampire. Now, I asked them, is this vampire sexy? And they said, oh, hell no. So I didn't actually look. I had to Google this picture right here, because if it's not a sexy vampire, it has no part in popular culture, at least mine.
That's fair. But isn't your whole thing that we should make them less sexy?
Well, I was just really bringing forth the question for everyone. Like, I need to pose the question to you. Do you think they should be less sexy? I do not, and I've proven as that I don't. But do you, the average unsexy human, think that they should be less sexy?
I'm seeing Guy Manley and Guy Manliest really shake their heads. What's going on, guys?
Sex those vampires up.
Yeah, there's no
sexy.
such thing as too sexy for vampires.
But then you're going to get that blood.
Vampires.
You're going to get that Blade One finale blood tornado of sexiness going on. Keep that in mind.
So what we need to do is find this vampire and murder them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I'm actually on board with that. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. And if we look back at one of your slides, we'll find out exactly how to do that. I think it's put them in a hot tub full of holy water. But yeah, that was my presentation on vampires in popular culture. Thank you, everyone in attendance, for keeping your eyes open. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Guy Manlier. And of course, our final speaker for the night, without further ado, Guy Manley.
Now, I would like to tie all of the presentations that we've had today together with a presentation about the entire history of the myth of the vampire. Now, we're going to have to separate during this presentation the myth of the vampire with what actually is going on with the real vampires. So hopefully this shouldn't take too long. I think the presentation that I put together is fairly concise, considering the history of the myth of the vampire. So hopefully we can get through this in a good amount of time. So let's get started with the next slide, please. Now, a brief history of the vampire myth. It goes all the way back to 1988. I know a lot of you don't remember 1988. It was a long time ago. But the first vampire, Spike from Angel and Buffy, came out in 1988. A lot of people don't know about the Spike books that Joss Whedon wrote when he was in elementary school, but this was the origin of the vampire myth. It goes all the way through Antonio Banderas, Angel, Brad Pitt. They're all vampires in real life, and they've also played them in movies. Johnny Depp is also a real vampire. Next slide, please. Now, the origin of the myth comes from somebody was eating an egg, and they said, now, I'm eating this chicken's child. What's going to happen if I would eat a human child? They decided that that was a little bit too brutal, so they just bit the baby's neck and sucked out all of its blood, thus turning British actor James Marsden into the first vampire, which is what Joss Whedon wrote his novels about when he was in elementary school. And it was the origin of the whole... James Marsters did go through and bite Brad Pitt and Antonio Banderas and all of the other famous vampires. And all because he said, if I'm going to eat this chicken's baby, why can't I eat my neighbor's baby? So a little bit messed up, but also we wouldn't know about vampires today if that hadn't happened. Next slide, please. Now, through cultural osmosis, everything that we know about vampires, it's one of those things. Your grandmother knew about vampires, and when she died, all that knowledge was brought to you. So through family trees and people dying and their consciousness going into their families, which is how it works, you know everything there is to know about vampires. You already know that James Marsden bit a baby, drank its blood, and turned into a vampire, turning several other people into vampires. And really, the words on this chart don't matter. All that matters is the arrows. The arrows represent your dead relatives and their consciousness transferring into you. Next slide. Now, vampires in the modern era. This is the worst picture of James Marsden I've ever seen. It doesn't look like him. it looks as though this is a robotic mouse, but this is exactly how it happened. James Marsden did go into the crib of his neighbor's baby, and he just bit that head and sucked all the blood directly out of the head. And this is a little bit too brutal. I'm going to have to ask you to skip to the next slide, please, because this is hard to look at. Now, the powers of transformation. As you know, vampires can turn into different animals. A lot of times, for some reason, when they're portrayed in popular culture, they turn into sexy animals like bats and wolves. But for the most part, most vampires are going to turn into possums. They turn into possums, and then just like in your Vampire Diaries books, in your Interview with the Vampire movies, they are going to have orgies. But the problem is, when you turn into a vampire, your human genitals fall off. The only time that you can have orgies is when you're transformed into an animal. So anytime you're out in public, mostly at night, and you see animals joined up in a ball, a rat king, a wolf king, a possum king,
It's more data.
It's all just animals. It's all just animal versions of vampires having an orgy. They still love to do it. They loved to do it when they were humans. Now they can't because they have any sort of human genitalia. So they have to do it as animals. Now, if we don't get this slide off of the screen right now, we're going to get demonetized on YouTube for sexual content. So I'm going to have to ask you to
Almost
go to
certainly.
the last slide, please. Vampires versus werewolves. I will now recite as much of Warren Zevon's song, Werewolves of London, as I can. And for any of you that know me, I was born in 1997. I'm very, very young. And so I don't know. All I know about Warren Zevon's song, Werewolves of London, is the part of the song that is in Kid Rock's version of some other song. So all I know is, "Ow, Werewolves of London. Ow." Next slide, please.
Big it up, ball to ball to ball, biggie.
Now, in conclusion, I think I made it perfectly clear about the history of the vampire myth and the reality of vampires. Now, when you get turned into a vampire, your human spouse is no longer going to want to be married to you because it is a lot of orgies, it's a lot of nightlife, and it's no human genitalia. So if you're married to a human and the only time you can have sexual relations is when you're in the form of a bat, though not compatible. So for the most part, you get turned into a vampire and you're going to have to get divorced. It's just a harsh reality of what happens when you get turned into a vampire. People think that not being able to go out during the day, having to subsist on human blood, is the most painful part of becoming a vampire. But really, it's the emotional stress that you have to go through. 100% of vampires are divorced, and it mostly has to do with not so much the blood drinking, but the genitalia falling off. And that's for any gender. If you have two sets of genitalia, they're both just gone. You look like a Ken doll down there.
So it's inclusive. Okay.
Yeah, no, everyone who turns into a vampire has their genitals fall off, and I'll take no further questions on that. I'm glad that everyone was able to attend our presentations today. Hopefully, you know more now about vampires than you did when we started this, and I will take questions as long as it's not about genitals falling off. Yes, Dave Borowski.
Okay, so you said that your grandmother knew about vampires, and you did very clearly state that your grandmother, or that you were born in 1997.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering how your grandmother knew about vampires before 1998 or 1988.
She didn't know before 1988. She found out about vampires in 1993. Died soon afterwards. So I was born with her knowledge of vampires when I was born in 1997.
Okay, yeah, that clears that up. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Guy Manliest.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Now, for the other presentations tonight have all included some reference to popular culture, such as the Vampire Diaries. Now, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit as to how the Vampire Diaries are relevant to your presentation tonight.
Well, I mean, the Vampire Diaries are about vampires. As I stated before, the Vampire Diaries came out in 1991 with 3 to 5 books per year, every year since then. It's one of the most pervasive points of pop culture having to do with vampires. Not the sexiest vampires. Everyone knows on the scale of sexy vampires that, of course, Antonio Banderas is the sexiest vampire. But
Arguable.
They're up there. They're like B tier sexy vampires.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Guy Manlier.
Now, I have a two-part question. My first part is, would you mind ranking Kiefer Sutherland as far as a vampire, knowing that he's not the sexiest being Antonio Banderas, but please rank Kiefer Sutherland as a vampire.
Kiefer Sutherland is a 7.3.
Okay.
And it mostly has to do with the mullet.
Yeah.
The mullet takes him down about 2.8 points in sexiness.
Now, the second part of my first part of my question is, knowing that The Lost Boys came out in 1987, directed by Joel Schumacher, which I'm pretty sure is prior to your history of vampires. Now that you've ranked a vampire in the movie, which would lead me to think that you know that's a vampire, prior to 88, please speak on this.
You have wrong data. The vampire, that movie, The Lost Boys, came out in 1989. And I will take no further questions about it.
Okay. Well,
I do have another question, kind of piggybacking on Guy Manlier's question, and I do have actual data to present for it. We can all agree that the Nosferatu 1 out of 10, right?
Yes.
Nosferatu was 1922.
Nosferatu, not a vampire.
Can you give me some, again, data to back that up?
Yeah, I just said it. Nosferatu is not a vampire. He is a buck-toothed weirdo with elf ears, and he drinks blood, but that does not make him a vampire.
Well, I mean, it says in the description of the movie that came out in 1922. This is a highly influential silent film of the mysterious vampire known as the Nosferatu.
That
played by
was
Max.
That was retrofitted. They never said vampire in Nosferatu.
That's fair. No, he's got you there, Dave.
Yeah, it was retrofitted in 1992. when they added the word vampire to
Yeah.
Nosferatu.
When
Yes.
Willem Dafoe was in it. Yeah, I remember that.
I mean, it's the internet, so who knows if it's accurate?
No, I mean, anybody can put anything they want up on the internet, so it's all just bullshit.
Yeah, true.
Guy Manlier, I'm gonna allow you one more question, even though you've had two already.
Well, I had one and then 1B, so that's one. Now, speaking of genitals falling off, when you said earlier that there was a possum king, that would allude me to think that there is a possum kingdom, which is, as we both know, a very popular Toadies song from the early 90s.
Also, the name of that album, yes.
Is this about vampires, knowing that it was post 88, but unfortunately, I'm not sure if you know that because it's pre 97.
Yes. Oh, I mean, I've taken in especially music from before the year I was born. But for the most part, movies before 1997 are all just terrible. But yes, I have listened to the Toadies' Possum Kingdom, and while they would have liked to have made the album about vampires, it's just a sad try to make money off of the popularity of grunge, and they're just one of those 90s bands that they just missed the mark of being a good band, and they tried very hard, but they failed miserably, and all of their songs sound the same.
So not about vampires or pop culture.
No,
just about possums.
Just about possums.
Yeah, fair.
Not vampires that turned into possums, just regular ass possums.
Well, on behalf of the staff and the janitor department, I just want to say thank you very much for your time and your patience with what happened before the show and throughout the show.
What happened before the show?
We don't. Let's not talk about it.
All right, fair enough. Just trying to collect data, but
it was terrible.
Right. Okay.
Well, once you hire us, we'll get that data into your research.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation, Mr. Manley. We appreciate that. And any questions from the panel. And now, with all four members of our panel having given their presentations, we are now going to vote on which speaker is going to win the $50,000 scholarship to Some Nobodies University, funded by Some Nobodies Patreon, and the Nostalgia Grand Prize. Now, of course, we're going to indicate that based on the order in which we made our appearances. I will be number 1, Mr. Borowski will be number 2, Manlier 3, and Manley 4. And we will be counting down in 3, 2, 1. And of course, with the self-vote tiebreaker,
that's a 3.
That's a 3. Oh, okay. So wait,
tie.
What? It's a tie. Well,
we all get $50,000.
I believe now that we have to split the $50,000 scholarship, or at least occupy the same dorm room.
I gotta send this Jurassic Park army to all 4 of us.
May I make a final pitch?
Whoa!
Sure.
This is unprecedented.
It is unprecedented, but I there's nothing in the rule book about it.
We have established that I am going to be having to fire a couple of researchers, and based on the obvious, intense amount of research the 3 of you have done, if the prize is given to me, then not only will it be given to me, but it then will funnel down into your paychecks as my new employees and researchers. So I feel like everybody wins.
Guy Manliest sells his labor to no man.
I'm sticking with Guy Manley.
Well, Guy Manliest already voted 2. Guy Manley voted 2.
Oh,
so
yeah,
looks like I'm swayed at least Guy Manley.
I would like to least be the one, since I'm the one who did change my vote and voted for you. I would like to be head researcher in your research.
I would say director of research.
Ethics in academia is dead today, and we fired the final bullet.
Well, I think we know what our next week's presentation is going to be on.
All right. Well, that concludes our conference for this week. Please, Mr. Borowski, tell us what our topic is going to be next week.
Your topic of next week needs to be the legitimacy of science in the media.
Oh, you heard it here first. We'll be talking about that next week, the legitimacy of science in the media. And of course, we have to give an outro to all of our panelists, starting with the winner, Mr. Dave Birowski. Can you tell the people either where to find you, what you want to plug, anything we can listen to you further on?
You can find me at Dave Birowski on all social media. I'm also appearing on a Kill Tony episode on YouTube Live that will premiere tonight. If you don't watch it live, it is going to be episode 550. That's my first ever YouTube premiered stand-up set, and then also more will be coming.
Tonight being March 28th, 2022, whereas this episode, I believe, premieres sometime in early May.
This is a Cinco de Mayo episode, everybody.
That's fine. Well, then it will be episode 550 of Kill Tony, which you can find on YouTube or any of your Spotifys and whatnot. Also, check out my podcast, The Obviously Complicated Podcast, which will be coming to YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music soon, and can now be found on SoundCloud.
And
Nice.
apparently, based on the tags that are from Facebook, you could find Dave Borowski just throwing a hissy fit in most Walmart customer service lines too. So if you're in the Austin, Texas area, look out for either Walmart customer services or the dumpster area of 7-Elevens where you can hear.
If you've seen green hair, you're going to get green with envy. Yeah.
Okay. And Guy Manley, where can people find you? Who are you?
Jack Billings presents Haunted Apartment Complex, a weird scripted audio comedy. You can also find me on I Love This Terrible Game, a video game show about video games, Generation Clash, a music podcast with me and my kid, and podcast of the year winner, No Time to Binge, with B Highland and a couple of schmucks. But yeah, podcast of the year, funniest comedy podcast of the year, and best podcast in popular culture at the Scene Snobs Awards. I mean, what else can you ask for?
A lot of vampires. Yeah. Like we can ask for more vampires on that podcast.
We can ask for more vampires, but we
Yeah.
can't ask for more abs because we have enough abs on that show to last us a lifetime.
That's true. There's 3 of them. And who needs more than one ab a person?
It's short for abdomen, right? Yeah.
I don't think so.
All right. And Guy Manley, or who are you? Where can we find you?
So you can find me spitting out all those brilliant words that Guy Manliest up here talks about. If you literally open up anything that's on your cell phone, tablet, or even old Tamagotchi devices, open up anything on there and just type in Some Nobodies. What you're going to find are award-winning podcasts such as No Time to Binge. Also, award-winning podcasts such as No Time to Binge. Also, award-winning podcast No Time to Binge, where you'll find me and a couple of schmucks as well. Obviously, Silicon Angels, which is the only and the funniest podcast about the IT department of sex robots. Maybe Talking Upstream, which is an award-nominated...
Sex robots.
Okay, we got to get this off here. Anyway, other than that, look up Some Nobodies, guys. Guy Manliest, what you got?
You can find me at the same place you find Guy Manlier. Also Twitter, Vorpal_words. Award-winning podcast, No Time to Binge. And I believe that's it. I'm not anywhere else.
We got to say our catchphrase. Guy Manley, can you please say our catchphrase?
Yeah. PowerPoint me to the exit.
And of course, until next week, I promise you, I'll treat you well, my sweet angel. So help me Jesus. We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Is that Warren Zevon?
Thank you for watching PowerPoint Showdown. Today's winner will receive a $50,000 grant courtesy of Some Nobodies Patreon. Congratulations on your win. Join us next week for another showdown. Thanks for providing that big prize, guys.